I woke up to the sound of my grandson's crying. The clock read 5:27 a.m., and for a second I thought it was a dream. Then I heard the car engine, a sudden roar, tires screeching on the gravel driveway. I ran to the window just in time to see Jane's silver sedan speeding down the road, her taillights shrinking into the Kansas dawn. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. 2 cereal bowls sat untouched on the counter, and beside them, her wedding ring and a folded note with my name written in shaky letters. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words were few, but they tore through me. I cannot do this anymore. Take care of them. I felt my knees give way. What had she done? And why did it feel like this was not the whole story? Before I continue, I want to thank everyone who has supported this channel. To those who have subscribed, you are my strength. And to anyone watching for the first time, welcome. I cannot wait for you to join our little community. Your likes and comments keep stories like this alive, and I would truly love to hear what you think about what has just happened. What would you do if your daughter-in-law disappeared and left 2 children behind? Now, let me take you back to that morning. My name is Ruby. I was 55 then, living in a quiet town outside Wichita, Kansas. I had 2 grown sons, but Alan, the older one, was always the quiet thinker. He married Jane young, right after college. She was beautiful in that restless way, like someone always searching for something she could not name. They had 2 boys, Eli, who was 7, and Noah, who had just turned 5. Those children were the light of my life. Jane and I never got along easily, but I tried to respect her. She called me too controlling, and I called her too unpredictable. But never, never did I imagine she would walk out on her own children. The police told me to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. I did not wait. I called everyone, her friends, her parents, even Alan, who was away working an oil job in Texas. His phone went straight to voicemail. Days passed, no word. I found her clothes missing, her jewelry box empty. It looked like she had planned this, but the letter felt rushed, wrong. Eli started having nightmares. Noah would sit by the window whispering, "Mommy will come back." I told him she would even when I stopped believing it myself. Then one afternoon, I went to the bank to access my savings, the account Alan and I had set up together for the kids' future. The teller gave me a strange look before she spoke. "Ma'am," she said, "your daughter-in-law withdrew everything 2 days before she left." My throat dried dry. Every cent. Gone. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The sun was setting behind the wheat fields, but all I could see were those words, "Take care of them." She had left me with nothing but her children and her ghost. But as I walked into the house, I noticed something strange. Her phone, charging on the counter, buzzing with unread messages. One of them was from Alan. "It is done. No one must ever find out." The message on Jane's phone haunted me for weeks. "It is done. No one must ever find out." I stared at those words until the screen went dark. I wanted to believe it meant something innocent, maybe a fight, a misunderstanding, but my gut whispered a truth I did not want to face. Alan knew. Still, I had 2 little boys looking up at me with eyes too young to understand betrayal, so I swallowed my questions and did what I had to do. I became their mother, their comfort, their protector. The first night, Eli asked me if his mommy was lost. I told him yes, that she was lost and needed time to find her way back. I hated myself for the lie, but sometimes lies are what keep children from breaking. Time moved in strange ways after Jane left. Mornings began with the sound of cereal crunching and the smell of toast burning. Evenings ended with bedtime stories and tears that came when the lights went off. Alan came home only twice that first year, once for Christmas, once for Eli's birthday. He looked older, tired, distant. He never talked about Jane, and whenever I asked, his face hardened. "Mom, let it go," he would say. She made her choice, but the guilt in his eyes was too loud to ignore. He sent money, sometimes irregularly, and the boys grew up calling me Mama Ruby. I was proud of them. Kind, respectful, strong despite everything. Yet deep down, I knew they were growing around a wound that had never healed. Small towns have long memories and sharp tongues. By the second year, whispers began to circle through the church, the market, the schoolyard. "She ran off with another man," someone told me at the grocery store. "Maybe she couldn't handle motherhood," another added, shaking her head like pity was a form of kindness. I kept my head high, but every rumor felt like a knife turned slowly. I knew Jane was alive. That message from Alan's phone proved it. But without evidence, what could I say? To protect the boys, I buried the truth. 8 years. That is how long it had been since Jane disappeared. Eli was 15 now, tall, quiet, gentle, while Noah was 12 and full of fire. They both had her eyes, though they did not remember her voice. It was a Tuesday when the letter came. The mailman handed it to me with a smile, not knowing that simple envelope would shake my world again. There was no return address, just my name written in careful cursive. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Jane did not leave. She was forced to. Ask Alan what happened that night. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, a scent Jane used to wear. My heart stopped. That evening, I went to Alan's old room. His things were still there, the trophies, the books, a framed family photo gathering dust. I opened his drawers, searching for something, anything, and then I found it. A small black notebook hidden beneath a pile of shirts. Inside were bank statements, transfers, coded notes, and a name I had never seen before, Marcus Lyle. And next to it, a phrase scrawled in Alan's handwriting, "If she talks, we lose everything." That night, the boys were asleep when I sat alone on the porch, the wind carrying the smell of rain. My hand shook as I held that notebook, realizing my son was not just hiding something, he might have destroyed a family to protect himself. Then, as lightning flashed across the Kansas sky, I heard footsteps at the gate. A woman's voice called out through the dark, "Ruby, it is time we talked." I knew that voice. It was Jane.
The rain poured that night like the sky itself was trying to warn me. Jane stood under the porch light, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face. For a moment, I thought I was seeing a ghost. She looked older, thinner, her eyes hollow but burning with something sharp. She held no umbrella, no apology, only a calm that felt dangerous. 8 years, I whispered. 8 years, Jane. Where have you been? She stepped closer, her voice flat. "You have my sons, Ruby, and I am here to take them back." Before I could speak, she reached into her bag and dropped a stack of papers at my feet. Court documents, her name printed clearly across the top. Jane Miller versus Ruby Carter, custody and kidnapping. The world tilted beneath me. The next morning, my small kitchen, the same one where I had once poured cereal for crying children, became a war room. I sat there reading every page, my heart pounding. Jane claimed I had kidnapped her children, changed their last names, and kept her from contacting them. She accused me of emotional manipulation and financial fraud. Every word was a lie. I hired a local attorney named Grace Morton. She was kind, direct, and brutally honest. "Jane's lawyers are out of Wichita," she told me, flipping through the paperwork. "This is not a simple custody case, Ruby. Someone with real money is behind her." The name hit me like a slow bullet. "Marcus Lyle," I said quietly. Grace paused. You know him? I nodded. He was Alan's old business partner. She frowned. That explains the resources, but what did your son have to do with this? I did not have the courage to answer. The first day in court felt like walking into a nightmare dressed in daylight. Jane sat across from me, perfectly composed in a tailored suit, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She did not look at me, not once, but when Eli and Noah walked in, her mask cracked for just a second. Her hands trembled. The boys froze. Eli's jaw tightened. Noah hid behind him. My sons, Jane whispered, tears finally spilling down her face. But Eli shook his head. You are not my mother, he said quietly. The courtroom gasped. The judge called for order. My heart broke, not because of what Eli said, but because I knew that Cain came from a wound too deep for any of us to heal quickly. Jane's lawyer began the attack, claiming I had brainwashed the children, painted Jane as a villain, and used Alan's death to gain sympathy. Alan. I closed my eyes for a moment. My son had died 2 years earlier in a construction accident. I had buried him, believing I would never understand the full truth. Now sitting under the cold fluorescent lights of a Kansas courtroom, that truth was clawing its way out. Midway through the hearing, Jane's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has one final piece of evidence to present. A screen was wheeled forward. A photo appeared. It was Alan, alive, smiling, standing beside Jane at an airport, time-stamped 6 months after she had vanished. Gasps filled the room. Jane turned toward me, her expression hard. He knew, Ruby. He knew I was alive. He told me to leave, said it was for our protection. I shook my head, tears spilling down my face. Protection from what? Jane's voice cracked. From the investigation, from the money he hid in my name. He said if I stayed, they would come for us. She looked straight at me. I left because your son asked me to. My world collapsed in silence. The judge called a recess. I sat frozen, my heart hollow, my mind racing through memories that now twisted into something darker. Alan's tired eyes, the phone message, the missing money. He had used Jane and me. As the courtroom emptied, Jane walked past me without a word, but just before she reached the door, she turned slightly and whispered, almost gently, "You should read the rest of that notebook, Ruby. Page 23. When I returned home that evening, trembling, I opened the notebook again. Page 23 was covered in numbers and one chilling line written in Alan's hand. If anything happens, she takes the blame. The next morning, the Kansas sky was pale and cold, the kind of gray that made everything feel suspended in time. I sat at the kitchen table with Alan's notebook open in front of me. My coffee had gone cold. My hands would not stop trembling. If anything happens, she takes the blame. Those words burned into my mind like acid. For 8 years, I had hated Jane for walking away. I had called her heartless, selfish, unfit. But what if she had not abandoned her children? What if she had been running for her life from the mess my son created? The truth was a cruel teacher, and that morning I learned just how little I had really known about my own child. Grace, my lawyer, arrived later that day. I showed her the notebook. She flicked through the pages slowly, her face tightening. "These are offshore accounts," she said. "Transfers made through shell companies under Jane's name. Your son must have been laundering money. It looks like Marcus Lyle was his partner, and maybe his enemy." My chest felt hollow. Enemy? Grace nodded grimly. If Alan tried to pull out of the deal, Marcus would have needed a scapegoat. Jane disappearing makes sense. She takes the fall, the money vanishes, Marcus walks free. The puzzle pieces began to fit, but the picture they formed was something I could hardly
bear to look at. Alan had told Jane to run. He had left me and the boys with the illusion of her betrayal, while he cleaned up the wreckage of his choices. Then he had died before he could make it right. The courtroom felt heavier the next morning. Jane sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her lawyer looked ready for war, but Jane's eyes were softer now, less steel, more sorrow. When it was time for me to speak, I stood. My knees were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. I did not kidnap those boys. I saved them. When their mother vanished, I did what any grandmother would do. I raised them with love. I protected them from gossip, from pain, from the truth I did not even know myself. But this was the truth none of us saw. My son's greed destroyed 2 families. He hid behind lies, and both Jane and I paid the price. A hush fell over the room. Jane's lawyer objected, but the judge motioned for silence. Then Eiley stood. My tall, quiet grandson walked straight to the stand. His voice was calm, but his eyes glistened. My grandma never hurt us, he said. She is the only reason we made it through. Noah followed, his smaller voice trembling. Mom left because Dad told her to, but Grandma stayed. Even Jane began to cry. For the first time, there was no battle between us, only the shared ache of everything Alan had broken. When the judge finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of mercy and judgment. Given the evidence presented, this court finds no grounds for kidnapping or misconduct. Custody remains with Mrs. Carter until further evaluation. Case dismissed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Jane walked toward me slowly. For a moment, I thought she might turn away, but instead she placed a trembling hand on my arm. I am sorry, she whispered, for leaving, for hating you, for believing the wrong man. Tears welled in my eyes. And I am sorry, I said softly, for not seeing what was happening, for blaming you when I should have asked why. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of 2 broken women forgiving each other. Months passed. Jane moved back to Kansas, not as the mother who ran, but as the one who returned to face her past. She and I still struggled. Forgiveness is not a single act, but a daily choice. The boys grew stronger, wiser, kinder. Sometimes when I sit on the porch watching the sunset, I think about Alan, about how love can twist when pride takes over, how secrets can poison even the best intentions. If there is one thing life has taught me, it is this: family can destroy you or redeem you, and sometimes it does both. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have forgiven Jane, or would you have held on to the anger? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to hear your thoughts. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more real-life stories of truth, pain, and redemption. Because sometimes the stories we tell are the only way we heal.